The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be FIFA's crowning achievement, the biggest tournament in football history. More teams than ever before, more matches, more cities, more television audiences, more money flowing through the sport than at any other moment in history. By every traditional measure, FIFA should be celebrating. Instead, just days before kickoff, the organization finds itself facing a growing backlash from some of the most powerful voices in football. Not from angry fans, not from politicians, not from activists outside from leagues, player unions, club executives, and football institutions that believe FIFA's relentless expansion is pushing the sport toward a dangerous breaking point. For decades, FIFA operated with a simple assumption. When FIFA made a decision, football adapted. But for the first time in years, that assumption is being challenged. And the battle now unfolding isn't about who will win the World Cup. It's about who controls the future of football itself. The World Cup was once football's greatest celebration. Critics now fear it is becoming football's biggest business project. Modern football is one of the most valuable entertainment industries on earth. At the center of that industry sits FIFA. Every World Cup generates billions in broadcasting revenue, sponsorship agreements, tourism spending, and commercial partnerships with every successful tournament. FIFA expanded its ambitions. More teams meant more matches. More matches meant more television inventory. More television inventory meant more revenue. The 2026 World Cup represents the largest expansion in tournament history. 48 national teams, 104 matches, 3 host nations, a competition so large that it dwarfs every previous World Cup. FIFA argues that expansion allows more countries participate and helps football grow globally. Supporters see a tournament becoming more inclusive than ever before. But critics see something different. They see an organization that has become increasingly dependent on constant growth, and they are asking whether football's governing body is expanding the game because it benefits football or because it benefits FIFA's business model. That question is no longer being whispered behind closed doors. It is now being asked publicly across the football world. Then something happened that FIFA rarely faces. Europe stopped quietly accepting decisions from above. For years, football's major stakeholders complained privately whenever schedules expanded or new competitions appeared. Clubs worried about player fatigue, domestic leagues worried about calendar congestion, players worried about recovery time, yet most criticism eventually faded. This time was different. European football organizations began moving beyond criticism and toward confrontation. Legal complaints were filed, formal objections were submitted, public statements became increasingly aggressive. The argument at the center of the dispute is simple but explosive. Critics claim FIFA acts both as football's regulator and as a commercial organizer that directly profits from expanding competitions. Whether regulators ultimately agree remains uncertain, but the significance goes far beyond any legal outcome. For the first time in years, some of football's most powerful institutions are openly treating FIFA not as an untouchable authority, but as an organization whose decisions can and should be challenged. Once that psychological barrier disappears, power becomes much harder to maintain. Behind every extra match, every new tournament, and every expansion plan stands one group that cannot avoid the consequences: the players. Modern elite footballers operate on schedules that previous generations could barely imagine. Domestic leagues, domestic cup competitions, continental tournaments, international breaks, commercial tours, expanded club competitions, expanded national team competitions. The calendar never seems to stop. For broadcasters and sponsors, more football creates more opportunities. For players, more football often means less recovery, less rest, less protection from injury. Medical experts, player unions, and former professionals have increasingly warned that football's calendar is approaching unsustainable levels. The concern is not simply about physical injuries. It is about cumulative exhaustion, mental fatigue, constant travel, constant pressure, constant performance demands. Every stakeholder in football benefits from more matches being played, but only one stakeholder is required to physically endure them. Critics argue that football's commercial success is increasingly being built upon workloads that would have seemed unreasonable only a decade ago. And that criticism has become one of the most damaging challenges FIFA faces before World Cup 2026. The deeper concern isn't just about scheduling, it's about trust. Across Europe, a growing number of football figures believe FIFA has become increasingly disconnected from the people most affected by its decisions. League officials argue that meaningful consultation often comes after decisions have effectively been made. Player representatives question whether athlete welfare is receiving the same priority as commercial growth. Club executives wonder whether football's governing structures are becoming too centralized around a single institution. None of these criticisms alone would create a crisis. Together, however, they paint a picture of growing frustration. FIFA still possesses enormous authority. It still controls the World Cup. It still remains the most powerful organization in global football. But authority and trust are not the same thing. Trust depends on belief. It depends on confidence. And once confidence begins to erode, even the most powerful institutions can find themselves facing resistance from unexpected places. The concern among FIFA's critics is not that football is collapsing. The concern is that football is becoming increasingly driven by commercial priorities, while the voices inside the game struggle to influence its direction. And perhaps the most uncomfortable criticism facing FIFA is also the simplest. When does growth stop being progress? For years, football operated on a basic assumption. Bigger meant better. More viewers meant success. More tournaments meant opportunity. More revenue meant growth. But some observers believe football has entered a stage where expansion has become an objective rather than a consequence of success. Every new competition creates additional content. Every additional piece of content creates new revenue streams. Every new revenue stream creates pressure for further expansion. The cycle appears endless. Yet football is not an ordinary entertainment product. Every match requires players to perform at elite physical levels. Every tournament occupies limited calendar space. Every expansion introduces new pressures throughout the ecosystem. Critics worry that football's popularity has become so enormous that governing bodies may be tempted to prioritize short-term financial gains over long-term sustainability. More matches can increase revenue, but they can also reduce scarcity. More tournaments can create excitement, but they can also dilute significance. The debate is no longer about whether World Cup 2026 will succeed. It almost certainly will. The debate is about whether football's leaders are building a stronger future or simply maximizing profits while the sport remains at the height of its popularity. Because the story is ultimately bigger than FIFA, bigger than Europe, and bigger than one World Cup. The matches will happen, the stadiums will be full, the television audiences will be enormous. Football's greatest stars will capture the world's attention once again. But beneath the spectacle lies a much larger struggle, a struggle over who football serves. Does the game primarily exist for the players who perform, the fans who support it, the clubs that develop talent, the leagues that sustain competition, or the institutions that organize and monetize the sport? Those questions are no longer coming from outsiders looking in. They are coming from within football itself. And history shows that when insiders begin questioning the foundations of a system, meaningful change often follows. Not immediately, not dramatically, but eventually. World Cup 2026 will be remembered for goals, trophies, celebrations, and unforgettable moments. Yet long after the final whistle blows, another battle will continue. Not inside stadiums, inside boardrooms, courtrooms, regulatory offices, and football institutions across Europe. FIFA's power is not disappearing. Its authority is not collapsing, but, perhaps for the first time in years, powerful voices inside football are openly asking whether the organization that governs the game has become too focused on growth, too focused on expansion, and too focused on revenue. The answers may not arrive during this tournament. They may not arrive this year, but the debate has already begun. And the decisions made after World Cup 2026 could shape the future of football for an entire generation.